Good evening. Welcome to everybody. The title of the shiur, which I publicized earlier, Synesthesia at Sinai. I wonder if anybody here knows the meaning of the word synesthesia or bothered to look it up in the last hour. It's not a very commonly used word. But nevertheless, my wife will probably think I'm indulging her because she always teases me about using words nobody else understands. So at Sinai, we had this experience of synesthesia, which is defined as follows. The production of a sense impression relating to one sense or part of the body by stimulation of another sense of part of the body. It's like smelling a color or, seeing a smell, and so forth. So those would be synesthesias, where there's kind of a combination of various senses. Now, where does it happen at Mount Sinai? So let me share with you. The verse says the following, and the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the blare of the horn, the mountain smoking, and when the people saw it, they fell back and stood at a distance. But if you look at the Hebrew, and let's just get the correct kind of pointer here, which makes it easier, the words are, Kol ha'am ro'im et ha'kolot v'lapidim. The people, all the people, ro'im, saw kolot velapidim. They saw sounds, lightning, sound of the shofar, the smoke, and so forth. So there was a powerful auditory experience, but the people saw it. So in English, they kind of cheated and they, changed the word saw, which is clearly ro'im, to perceive, to witness, or whatever it is. What does it mean to see a sound? And Rashi will tell us that this is to be understood quite literally. Ro'im et hakolot, he says to us, they saw the sounds, they saw that which would be heard, and he sources the mechilta, something which is impossible to see on any other occasion. So normally one cannot see sounds. This was something quite unusual, typical, related to Matan Torah, to this unbelievable experience of receiving the Torah, and this is where they had this experience. So how do we understand this idea of seeing the sounds? But before I even address this question, let me pose another one. In a typical Jewish style, we always answer a question with another question. I think once we understand this other question, then we'll be doing a little bit better. So my question is this: why are they referred to as sounds? What did the people really experience at Sinai? They experienced Aseret HaDibrot, Kol HaDevarim Ha'el. They experienced the words they referred to, in fact, as Aseret HaDibrot, from the word davar, dibur, speaking. So why they referred to as kolot? In fact, when the story is repeated in Devarim, where the Aseret HaDibrot feature again, in this week's parasha, Yitro, we have the Aseret HaDibrot initially. When Moshe goes back over the retrospective of the 40 years in the desert, he repeats the Aseret HaDibrot, concluding with the words, Hadvarim ha'ele diber Hashem. Those are the words that God spoke. El kol kalchem, to all of you, congregation. And then he mentions kol gadol, a mighty voice. So let's just stop for a moment and ponder the difference between a voice and speaking. We use the words maybe interchangeably. They don't mean the same thing. A sound, a kol, is a sound. And a sound doesn't necessarily have to come formatted into words. A sound can be guttural. In fact, babies start sounding far before they learn how to talk, and they can express their pain, their fear, their happiness with various sounds that parents become attuned to and learn to understand, whether this is, the happy gurgle of a contented child, or, the moan of a hungry child, or the crying of a wet baby, and so forth. Those are all sounds. It is when we learn to speak that the words create a shape and a limitation, so that we cannot express as much in words, but of course we can express ourselves far clearer in words, but we can't say as much. Whereas one sound of the voice, a kol, can actually say far more. So when we haven't got the right words, what happens when we haven't got the right words? We revert to when we didn't have any words. We revert to what we did when we were babies, and we wanted to call out for attention, but all that came out, because we didn't have words yet, is we cried. And crying is often an expression of an emotion that is too powerful to be contracted, formatted into words. So whereas words are clearly a better form of communication, it is a far more limited form of communication. And what we have to learn is actually to read between the lines. When somebody talks to us, we must listen not just to the words that they use, but try and capture what I'm going to refer to as the kol, or the sound, the voice, because that says more than just the words that are actually used. I'm going to show you two examples in the Torah, and there are many of instances where the person spoke, but what the listener had to grasp was the kol, the inner, fuller, deeper meaning of what was going on. And we're going to, of course, move that and transpose that to the giving of the Torah Matan Torah in a moment. So here is Sarah talking to Abraham, and probably a very, very hard conversation, one of the more difficult conversations that the couple ever had. Sarah is not happy with the behavior of Ishmael, who is the son that Hagar, the Egyptian, had born to Abraham. And she says she saw him playing, but the commentaries elaborate that this word mitzachek, playing, well, but it wasn't nice games. It wasn't good games. She says to Abraham, you need to send her away. Gareish hamazot bena, kilo yirash ben hamazot Yitzchak. Cast out that slave woman and her son. For the son of the slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. Now, very hard conversation, very hard to find the right words. And maybe she failed. Maybe she didn't choose the right words, because if I was Abram at this point, I would say, this is jealousy. This is about inheritance. This is about, and really, Sarah's concern is far deeper. It's about the upbringing of a child. It's about the nefarious influence that Ishmael is going to have, is already having on his younger half brother Yitzchak, and she's concerned about, what Ishmael is going to do to him and others. Two boys will grow up side by side, and so the words are limiting, but it's coming out awful. I don't think they would have been, a good way of seeing it. So Avram is aggrieved. He's not very happy about this, and he doesn't want to do it. Hashem says, "Don't be distressed. Tell as she says. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says. Is through Isaac that the offspring shall be continued for you." But look at the Hebrew, the original text. Shema bekolah. Listen to the sound, the voice. Don't just listen to Asher Tomar Lecha Sarah, to what she is saying. Hear the call. The words she's using are limited. Therefore, maybe you're not really understanding. Stop, ponder, and think about what she really wants. And when you understand what she really wants, you'll understand that it's Isaac who's going to be the continuation of the offspring, that Yishmael is going to go a different way. And then the verse continues. It's going to be Pera Adam. He's going to go his own way. He's going to, not amount to, I want to say not amount to much, but he's not going to be the continuation of the legacy of Avraham Avinu. Yitzchak is going to be the one. And so we need Avraham to hear the call, the voice of Sarah, the sound of Sarah, the deeper message, and not only the words that she is using. Example number 2 is actually from this week's parsha. And it's Yitro, and the parsha of Matan Torah, of the giving of the Torah, is actually called Yitro because of his input at this point over here. And this is when he watches Moshe sitting and judging the people, and he's not happy. He's not happy with the way it's going. He says, it's incorrect. Why do you act alone? The people are standing about you from morning till evening. You sitting, they're standing above you, and you're doing it all alone. It's not going to work. Now he says, Shema bekoli. Listen to my voice. Listen carefully. Okay, not just to the words I'm going to say, but try and capture the essence of the message that I'm giving you. And I suggest that you be the main guy, and you'll be there to take the spirits to Hashem if necessary, and then to use your divine inspiration to be able to judge them, but also appoint helpers. Sarei Asarim, Sarei Alafim, Sarei Meot, Sarei Chameshim, Sarei Ba'asarot, various tiers of chiefs, thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and they're going to help you with the leadership of the people. Does Moshe hear? Vayishma Moshe l'kol chodno. Moshe heard the voice of his father-in-law. In other words, Moshe doesn't say, Vayishma Moshe divrei chotno. He heard the words of his father-in-law. It says he listened to the sound of his father-in-law. He actually tried to understand what Yitro was telling him, not just the words he was using, but the deeper meaning of it all, and he captured all that. Now that takes us to the Aseret HaDibrot. The Aseret HaDibrot that God delivered was a very powerful message, well beyond the words that we heard. If the entire experience that was prepared for 49 days, which for a week now they were standing outside Mount Sinai, which all the anticipation had been built up, was just for them to hear simple day-to-day laws. I once heard, I may be wrong, but I think it was Chief Rabbi Lau, Senior, the father, describe how the president of a country, wants to address all the citizens of his country in prime time, and he wants every TV channel to carry it, and all the inhabitants of this land are convinced that there's going to be an announcement of gigantic proportions, family meeting, and the president gets onto the screen and the entire country is riveted, and they are discussing and they're waiting all day, the newspapers and the talk shows, and everyone's wondering what kind of powerful messages the president is going to deliver to us. Gets onto a screen and says, my fellow South Africans, it's flu season, dress warm, also speed kills. Make sure to observe the speed limit and wear your seatbelts. Have a very good night. Who's the next person to be interviewed on a talk show? Top psychiatrist at Falkenberg to discuss what has gone wrong with the president. Now, the Jews have been preparing for a message from the Almighty. He says, I'm God. Don't worship others. Don't kill. Don't commit adultery. But those words, that was just the ostensible part of what was being delivered. There's much more behind it. There isn't just the Devarim, there is the Kol as well. So it's not just the laws that are being given. That's just a container. There's also a far deeper meaning to all of that. As sages say, that contained in those Aseret HaDibrot were all 613 commandments. In fact, there's a book called Azharot by Sadia Gaon, and there he actually goes through the exercise of listing the 613 commandments and showing which word in the Aseret HaDibrot hints to it. In fact, it contains the entire totality of the Torah, written Torah, as well as oral law, which Moshe subsequently went up on Mount Sinai, remained for 40 days, 40 nights, 40 days he received the written Torah, that's a scroll that we have, and then in the nights he studied the oral law, which is the interpretation and the explanation thereof. So the laws were given in writing, and then to understand how to apply them, interpret them, there was an oral law that came with them. All of that is in the Aseret HaDibrot. So there's much more. So there is the Dibrot, the words themselves, there is the Kol, there is the deep and inner meaning. There's a fascinating medrash that tells us that the voice of God came out, and then as it hit earth, it split into fragments. And every person caught a fragment that was relevant to them. So that each of the Aseret HaDibrot, and we'll illustrate with a couple of examples, each of the Aseret HaDibrot spoke differently to each individual that was listening. I mean, God says, commandment number 2, do not worship idols. I mean, it's not for everyone. Most of us have no temptation of idolatry whatsoever, but those who had no temptation for idolatry, and the Yetzer for idolatry was far worse, back then, may have heard a different message. Don't allow yourself to be fooled by new age ideas, by foreign ideas to Torah. Don't worship stars, influences, sports people. Don't worship technology. Each of us would have heard that commandment number 2 in a different way. Do not murder. Few needed to be reminded not to grab a knife and plunge it into their fellow's heart. But most of us had to be reminded that embarrassing somebody, particularly in public, and making their face turn red, spilling their blood internally, is actually a rubric of that sixth commandment. When it said, "Do not steal," well, that could be understood by all of us, on so many levels. From don't walk into a shop and walk out with goods, to don't take home a paperclip from the office. It's all different forms of theft, and we all have to be careful about honesty. So we could carry on. Do not commit adultery. Well, to some that must have been a direct instruction to keep them on the path of morality. To others it was be careful not even to look or to speak flirtatiously with members of the opposite gender, etc. When we were told, do not bear false witness against your fellow, well, lies comes in many shades, from white to very, very dark, and everybody had to understand this injunction of, do not lie at their level. So, hearing the kol is not hearing the dibur. Hearing the dibur was just hearing the Aseret HaDibrot, full stop. The kol, the sound, the voice, was far deeper. It was a wordless, deeper meaning that we had to capture. We had to stand at Sinai and capture that. So why? See. How see? Well, let me illustrate that. Somebody tries to convince you of something that you were until then not convinced. And now just play out these two scenarios, two possible responses. You say to him, I see your point, or I hear what you say. I hear what you say is a very guarded, restrained. I'm not sure I'm convinced, but I've heard you now think about it. But I don't think I got it. I don't think. I see your point means I can see it. It's not just something I've heard, but something I can actually visualize. We all know that something that you see is far more powerful than something that you only experience in auditory fashion. If somebody tells you, a fact, you'd either believe them or not, depending on how convincingly they were able to convey that fact. But if you see it with your own eyes, it's going to be impossible for you to deny the reality of that you saw, and you will try and convince others with the words, I saw it with my own eyes. So when you say about something that you've heard, that you've seen it, it means that you've now been with your mind's eye, being able to visualize it, internalize it, and fully embrace what is being said to you. Whereas if you've only heard it, it still remains far more external. So saying the Jews saw the sounds is actually saying something very profound and deep. Not the Jews heard the Aseret Dibrot. They actually experienced it in what psychologists or doctors would call synesthesia. They actually saw, visualized, grasped the entire message, the depth of the message, not just the ostensible part or the audible part, in this case, of that which they could hear. So that's ham ro'im et hakolot vet halapidim. But let me, in the few moments that remain, take it to a little bit of a deeper level. What was going on there at Har Sinai? It was a far more powerful experience than just gathering and hearing the voice of Hashem. It was a moment at which heaven and earth met. That is, that the barrier that existed until then between the spiritual and the physical was broken. And now God comes down on the mountain and addresses the people. And that communication is creating a link between heaven and earth. God coming down on Mount Sinai. And the first letters of the certainly brought the first word Anochi, which is an unusual word, because normally we say for I, and the Lord your God, I, Ani. Anochi is an unusual word, quite a clumsy word, that actually is an acronym in Aramaic for Ana, Nafshit, Katavit, Yahavit. I, myself, Nafshi, my soul, myself, my essence. I wrote Katavit Yahavit. Yahav in Aramaic is to give, and that's Aleph Nun Chaf Yud. I, God says, gave myself to you in the Aseret Dibrot, allow you to grasp part of me. And because we already have a part of Hashem within us, that's under Shema, and there was this resonance created that couldn't be created before because God kind of gave a new dimension of himself into the world. It was an experience more powerful than anything the world had ever experienced, and everything the world would ever experience until Mashiach comes. Because what is the era of Mashiach? I spoke about that a little bit last week. When the world is transformed into a place that is a home to God rather than a place alien to Hashem. When we've created a dirah, we've created a dwelling for Hashem where you can be in this world. That is going to happen in a permanent fashion when Mashiach comes. Why will it be a permanent fashion? Because we have worked so hard to make it happen. Because we have made this world a home for God. We have created a place for Hashem to be. We built the home, and over hundreds of years, we have, by performing mitzvot, by refraining from sins, we have created a home for Hashem. So eventually, when Mashiach comes, it's going to be a permanent home. But at Mount Sinai, it was just a glimpse, a flash of God coming down on the mountain. It was powerful. In fact, it was too strong, too powerful, too difficult for the world and for the Jewish people, who were the epicenter of this unbelievable blast from heaven, to be able to withstand. So they are midrashim you have heard. They're all in the Gemara Shabbat that deals with the story of Matan Torah. And one of the stories there is that when the Jews heard, they said that they brought, their souls flew out of them. Their souls, not just they fainted, they kind of died. God had to revive them, bring them back. And what did he use? So there's something called Tal Techiyah. There's something called dew of revival. Hashem has a lot of that ready to be used, because when Mashiach comes, he's got to create a great resurrection of everybody. And so he's got copious amounts of Tal Techiyah revival dew that he is going to use to bring all those who've passed on in past generation back to be there to greet Mashiach and to be part of the experience of the world as it will be then. So Hashem had to dip into that store of Tal Techiyah and whatever, sprinkle that upon the Jewish people to bring them back. So what they basically had was a mini Mashiach experience, where a level of godliness that had never entered into the world before was there as a blast for a short while. Because it wasn't something we had worked on and accomplished, it was just a blast, and it dissipated and went away. And at the end of the Sinai experience, it says the shofar was sounded, and they could send their animals back up the hill to graze on the mountain. There was no sanctity to Mount Sinai. And for those of you who ever had the inclination or actually carried out the dream of climbing to the top of that mountain, there is no spiritual significance, even if the spot that they call Mount Sinai today is in fact accurate, which is a matter for a whole different discussion, but it's nobody's convinced that's actually the place of that of the revelation of Sinai. Nevertheless, it's not holy ground, and you can go there. It's not a problem, because that Sinai experience was just a whiff. It was so powerful, as I said, that the Jews died. Like when Mashiach comes, where to get ready for that new level of godliness that's going to be in the world, well, people will die and God will have to revive them. The revival of the dead. How does one express that they were experiences that were felt by a human body that bodies aren't really meant to experience? Because we have five senses, and the eyes are meant to see, and the ears are meant to hear, and the nose is meant to smell, and we have taste through the mouth, and we have skin that feels, and godliness cannot be in any way perceived through any of these senses. How would we, in English, or in this case in Hebrew, describe that we perceived a dimension that cannot be by a normal human body felt with any of the normal senses? So the image that's used is seeing a sound. As soon as you read seeing a sound, you realize, this is not a normal experience. This is not an earthly experience. This is a heavenly experience. This is people experiencing things that cannot be experienced with normal senses of the world. And so this is what Rashi means when he says, they saw that which is ordinarily heard. They suddenly internalized the dimension of godliness that had never been present and would not be present for millennia to follow. Please God, may we experience this very soon in our time. Have a wonderful evening.